I'm here with Moshe Cohen, the founder and CEO of Gravity. Is it Gravity Charging or is it Gravity?
It's just Gravity Inc.
Very well, Gravity Inc., who has been incubating with seed funding from Google and others a new CPO concept, which currently has its debut location in the center of Manhattan, which is a notoriously difficult place to stand up high-powered charging stations, but you did it. So congratulations, sir. That's quite a
Thank
feat
you.
in and of itself. We could basically declare victory right here. But wait, there's more. Before we get into what the future plans in the existing station and the press release for upcoming stations, just a brief background of your starting of this company. As I understand, Israeli citizen who came from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and then was the first university you came to in the States, MIT, for the PhD program?
Yeah, I was born in Chicago, initially raised in LA, and immigrated to Israel with my family. And I initially studied my undergrad in Hebrew University in a joint economics and law program, clerked in the Israeli Supreme Court, and then came back to MIT for a PhD in economics, where I focused on industrial organization, dynamic games, maybe a lot of things that today would be called AI and machine learning. But as applied to sort of economic concepts, was very interested in energy throughout my career, but there wasn't a lot of interesting work that was done, and we'll talk about that in the EE side, and so we'll talk about that. I completed that, and my first job was at Columbia in the business school finance department, where essentially I was bringing economic firepower in terms of technique, statistics, econometrics, math, to financial applications, and eventually was doing some other projects on the side, but eventually started building companies and started Gravity 4 years ago in February of 2021.
Yeah, my personal opinion, considering the growth curve of electric vehicles and the adoption curve, technology adoption curve, just general technology adoption curves, the decrease of battery prices, and in my personal opinion, the inevitability of the continued increase of adoption as a result of their reliability, their speed, them being quiet and good for the national interest as a result of domestically produced energy, multiple other things, that electric vehicles are on an upswing that's unavoidable. And having someone who is economically focused, looking at electric vehicle charging as a business in order to start is noteworthy, in my opinion, because it wasn't so long ago where electric vehicle charging companies were basically subsidized entities that needed someone else to help fund them in order to just keep their operations going. And I believe someone such as yourself looking at doing a venture such as Gravity is indication that you believe there's sound financial reason to join the market now. And I don't want to delve too deeply into the business plan of Gravity, but is that far off the mark or not?
I think the motivation to build a company, building these companies is hard, very hard, and ambitious, was that I felt like things were going in the wrong direction for the future of the grid, for the stability of the businesses, and so on. So sustainability starts with financial sustainability. So fundamentally, what I looked at is saw a pattern where people were trying to emulate gas stations and building electric gas stations. And when you think about electricity distribution, that's exactly the wrong way to do it. You don't want to have additional peaky points that are not used frequently in terms of your power distribution. And in fact, when you're dealing with an EV, you have this huge battery with a lot of optionality of consumption. So we started with, let's bring the charging to where the cars are parked already, and most of those places have electrical distribution. And so this would be a means to essentially augment the distribution that's there. And what we have found, which is very different, is that there's sort of the best of all worlds. You're actually able to connect the EVs to the grid where and when they're parked. When you do that, you actually are a net source to the grid. You help the grid rather than being a net draw. And obviously, it's a much better proposition today. Charging, I just think of it as download of power, right? Like we build these access points, you can upload, download, balance grid. So currently we're focusing on the download of power. if you think of the download of power where we have our economics in terms of the electricity arbitrage, the cost of providing that power, connecting to existing service is much lower. We're co-locating with other uses. You can imagine we can economize on a lot of things like demand charges and so on. The value to the customer is way higher because there's no dedicated trip that's needed anymore. They literally will, in the future have to do absolutely nothing to refuel. And so our concept was new technology, regardless of what it is, has to be cheaper, faster, better than existing technology. Existing technology is not plugging your car into a wall. It's charging it's refueling at a gas station. And so can we create a product that will be cheaper, faster, better, more convenient than that? And that's what we built.
Understood. And the technology, I understand, obviously governed by IP, but switching matrices, is that what you call the actual chargers?
Well, so what we need to do is basically connect all these batteries that live inside the EVs to the grid. Now, the first version of our equipment, the current generation that's deployed, it's UL listed, right? What we're essentially doing is we're tapping incoming service, often past the transformer, into one or more buildings, one or more services. We take that power, which is generally 480 volts, or we'll step it up to 480 volt AC, convert it to 1000 volt DC. And then, we can do this in different increments, right? Essentially, we're doing it currently in 30 kilowatt increments. And those 30 kilowatts are stacked modules that can all get daisy chained together. So you can have megawatts of these modules. And so what you need to do is essentially create a path from every 30 kilowatt module to every access point in every car. So the switch matrix, the current technology that we have deployed, is essentially a matrix of contactors that'll give you a physical path from every module to every access point, which is what gives you the flexibility. It's a switching tech. So that's the way that you're able to essentially share all converted power with any access point and do that real time and adjust that real time with charge curves and with different requirements.
In the smart meters for the tenants in the properties adjoining, I'm assuming there's also links to, in order to ensure that whatever their current load needs are flowing unobstructed, and you're just taking the excess that is not in use. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is going to be a process. So we're, in deep discussions with different interconnection groups and, general services. So phase one is essentially we map out a city. We're able to look at all the transformers, so the final distribution point, right? The transformers in the city, or in the region, and look at which transformers have excess capacity. And then we interact those transformers with excess capacity with parking garages and parking meters, and then figure out, okay, where is their access capacity of the transformer, so that we're able to sort of share power at the transformer level with one or more buildings. That's kind of the current architecture that we have now. The initial installations that we're doing, I mean, it's still a tiny fraction of what you're going to need, right? If we're doing 2-3% of spaces, that's a tiny fraction. As you go more and more deeper into the number of spaces, maybe it's 10, 20, 30%, then you're really sharing more deeply and balancing more deeply. And that's what the technology is built to do, but it's happening kind of over time. But the sites that we've taken now, generally, we have a lot of flexibility. The overlap with the site is very minimal, so nobody's going to feel any difference.
And sir, I've been watching DC fast charger implementation in the United States for the better part of a year. And long pole obviously is the delivery of the power. And do I understand correctly that there's no phone call to the power company as you spin up a charging site?
Yeah, generally, the site we have in Manhattan, we have 12 megawatts of nameplate capacity, so 24 500 kilowatt continuous DEAPs. No utility upgrades were needed, no impact on the transformer. We're sharing power with two buildings in a way that they don't have to throttle down. And so from the utilities perspective, you'd still do a load evaluation because they want to, they're balancing the loads. They don't give you a dedicated amount of power per building. So you do a load calculation, but generally they'll come back and say, yeah, no problem, go. We're not asking them for any service. We're not asking them for any upgrades. We're not asking them for anything, which is much better because what we're doing even today is giving them predictability behind the meter, which is something traditionally they don't have.
Yeah. And I'm speechless. So genius. It's just amazingly impressive.
Thank
And
you.
going to California, where it's notorious, PG&E's timelines are some of the most atrocious on the planet, and being able to show up, and I'm guessing some of the sites that were listed in the press release conceivably could be open before Christmas.
All of the sites that are listed had excess power, so we're working with I think, as you can imagine, a much bigger pool of sites from the same partner. All of these had power. The question is, and we're talking to the different utilities. It's SCE, LADWP. The question is this question you mentioned, where we're going to say, like, look, we have the power there, we have the switchgear. By the way, you're going to start seeing more power being used. Is that okay? And so that's the kind of ask to open quickly. So that should be a lot faster. I mean, again, until we open, we don't know, but these are very quick construction. Power's ready, so they should open a lot more quickly. Of course, and this is the general strategy. Let's open a bunch of sites that we can open quickly while preparing for more power in places that need to be there.
Okay, and these will be gravity-run sites. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Gravity
generally,
branded?
you could, they'll be branded with us, and when you hear of the other party, you'll see there'll be joint branding. Yeah, I mean, you can think of them as similar to superchargers, but kind of in more dense areas. And I think, as we explained in the press release, we're adding a lot more features there that don't exist in supercharger networks. That'll be really helpful, not just the speed, but also different elements that'll help with autonomous vehicles, humanless charging, and grid resiliency, which is kind of the point of this whole thing, is grid resiliency. If I could say, like, maybe there's like two key points just to kind of frame where we are. The motivation for what we're doing is not this obsession with cars or charging or anything like that. The motivation is that the grid has an enormous distributed storage problem. We have a lot of capacity currently in our electrical grid, but that capacity is not able to be distributed where it's needed. There have been a patchwork of fixes that have happened over many, many years of relative stability. But with the load growth that's coming in with AI and EVs and all these other things, these grids are going to start collapsing. And we're seeing this happen already around the world. And I can just tell you, these utilities, these grids are not, they're bending, as they would say. Are they going to break? They will. So the answer to this question is, where can you find an enormous amount of distributed storage at the edge? EVs, they have it, and they're literally wasted. They're just sitting there when you need it. Like, the blackouts that are happening in, Pacific Palisades, people are telling me, like, how do I have a blackout when I have 2 Teslas outside and I have 150 kilowatt of battery power, right? So it's very important to integrate EVs so that we have more stable grids with more abundance of power and more resiliency to do whatever, to do electrification, to do AI, data centers, all these things that we need to do. So that's our motivation. Our motivation is connecting these batteries. Today, charging is downloaded power, but there's a lot more that these batteries are going to do. And we're the only company in the US that is not an EV OEM that makes all our hardware, all our software, and does run sites, which is critical. It's a critical component to reliability. Nobody else is doing it. The reason that Tesla's reliability is so much higher than everyone else's, Tesla and Rivian, I think, is because they do full stack. Everything else breaks. There's so many subcomponents of firmware. There's different behaviors. The cars are interpreting standards differently, communicating differently. It's just impossible to synthesize these systems, to orchestrate these systems, even just for charging, if you don't have full visibility into the whole stack. And so that's what Gravity's doing. We're doing that, and then moving to orchestration of these as grid support.
Okay, so just looking at the hardware, as I understand, they're called DEAPs, distributed energy access points, which are actually the touch point that the consumers see. And the site in Manhattan has the ones that are able to sustain 500 kilowatt continuous UL listed. But there's also the curbside ones, which sit on a pole 8 feet off the ground, that are only rated at 200, but are currently not deployed anywhere. Is that not correct?
We're very actively in the process of getting some deployments.
Correct.
These are very sensitive issues, as you could imagine. The counterparties. I think that it is absolutely critical to have curbside DEAPs, because what the curbside DEAPs do is they give you resiliency, grid resiliency on a whole block level, which means that if there's a power outage, the city or whoever at any fleet could put in a bunch of vehicles that then power the buildings that are connected on the whole block.
Drop a couple Hummers in there.
Hummers or service vehicles, you could cycle them through. There's just enormous opportunity. So that's why we focused on it. The 200 versus 500 kilowatt, by the way. So we can distribute with our technology up to a megawatt. We chose this kind of 500 kilowatt. It was very hard to certify that continuous because we certified in 23. There was literally no lab that could even do this, which means we're running it for a week or 2 weeks straight at 500 kilowatt. We could go higher. Our view is we should go higher with voltages rather than with current, because the current is what makes these cables really big and unruly. So we have 500 kilowatt continuous, which is massive overkill to whatever's out there. That means it could run for weeks, which is many batteries. We have 200 kilowatt, which is an air cooled, and then some of our options will be 200 kilowatt continuous, but they'll be able to go up to 500 kilowatt for like 8 or 10 minutes. So we may use that because what we're seeing with the duty cycles of the vehicle is currently we can deploy that. And then if we need continuous, we can add some cooling later. It's fully modular. And so those are the type of systems that we're thinking about. And then, we have lower powered as well, but essentially we're trying to take the same bucket of converted DC power and flexibly route it to as many vehicles that are connected through these access points as possible.
Understood, sir. And again, very impressed with the solution, not only being able to provide charging services to vehicles, but a more holistic view of what we're trying to solve for is something that I agree has been definitely missing, and is tremendously exciting to see sites like these start to come online. So let's talk about California. I've seen sites there that have been waiting to open for years, as I mentioned, notoriously difficult. And we have a list of 8 locations, and definitely a site for sore eyes, because although everyone thinks California has got all the charging in the world, it's actually a little bit falling behind just because of the increase of demand is outpacing the ability to put in new chargers. And Los Angeles in particular is what I understand to be one of the more underserved areas of the country. And very exciting announcements. Are we looking at the locations to have the 500 or 200 or a mixed bag of both?
Yeah, generally we'll do 500 pretty much everywhere now. It's very important to hit that mark. I think anything below 500 for these types of destinations is too slow, obsolete, because that sort of approaches this 5-minute charging concept that now has like been, BYD and CATL, which are making more than half the batteries for all these cars, have now announced. They set that point. That's the same speed as a gas station. So we need to put in that infrastructure at sort of that level. So generally we'll be installing 500 kilowatt. At least these sites will be all 500 kilowatt, and most sites will be at least partially 500 kilowatt, if not faster.
Tremendously exciting. And you mentioned partnering with brands who are able to provide locations for these stations. And do I understand correctly that Gravity's seed phase, where the technology is being vetted and approved and the reliability improved, and all these initial phases are starting to now progress to more deployments? So Los Angeles would be the first of more? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like I was saying kind of before the call, right? The most important thing here is reliability. That's the most important thing, because the problem is people are showing up at chargers. I mean, I did this in Santa Monica. You go and it says there's a bunch of these chargers and none of them work, right? So problem number 2 is that they take way too long, and there's false advertising in terms of speed and all that. So you're there for an hour instead of for 10 minutes. But the bigger problem is you just can't charge. So people are like literally running out of battery power. Their whole day is gone. They have to tow the cars because, we see this a lot because the chargers don't work. So we spend a lot of time. We launched in 23. We spent a lot of time from an engineering perspective on reliability. The second part is scale. So like this doesn't work if, you add 3 or 4 sites a year, right? We have to get to thousands of sites as soon as possible. And there's single partners that just in those partners alone, you get to thousands of sites. So we've prioritized partners where we could scale cross portfolio, generally with an emphasis on the cities with the highest adoption, very quickly. And that took a long time to fortify these partnerships. They obviously go through a lot of vetting, but now you'll see a series of announcements like this of a whole bunch of sites in an area so that you have full coverage of something that you can trust as an EV driver.
And it might be too early to ask because I understand the existing location in Manhattan is white glove, where
Yeah.
billing is taken care of at the time of charging through an attendant. And is there, I guess, membership or a UI interface, or is everything going to be ISO 15118-2 or?
-2 and -20. It's a whole mess with the ISO that we've dealt with. Plug-in charge versus auto charge. We're dealing with all those kind of standards. We have a mobile app. We didn't launch it for the first year. It was just tap and pay with recognizing it. The reason that we have the attendance is not just white glove. It's because it's a learning experience for us to understand these new populations that are driving vehicles. A lot of them are FHV drivers that may not even speak English. There's a lot of new cars coming online with all types of different potential bugs that could happen. And so we literally have people on site all the time to learn and make the service better. We are launching an app, I think, very shortly, in a matter of weeks, which will be optional. Essentially, it's a different world now. So we're basically designing infrastructure that you're meant to only miss when it's not there, right? That's the way I like to think about it. Like, ideally, the access points that we have, they're the smallest by far. They don't take up space. I'd like them to be invisible. That's going to be like sort of the next phase. And the app is also something. It's an app that will run, but it's literally designed for you to never have to use it. But if you want, you can open it up and see all the statistics and see the speed, and we'll make it, it's very lean and nice. But generally, the goal is you never have to think about it. You register once, you have an account, you have your provisions. We're only going to bother you if there's a problem. And so that's generally the way the tech stack is working. But there's also a tap and pay. If you don't want an app, no problem. That's fine.
Well, fastest charging in the United States delivered without a transformer. I mean, this is a dream come true. Congratulations on being able to, as you say, to build a company is a very difficult endeavor. And by all accounts, you're off to a tremendous start. Very exciting, sir. So it's been a pleasure, Mr. Cohen, and best wishes in the future. We'll be sure to keep in touch.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and coverage. Really appreciate it. Yeah.